Our next panel is called Delivering Change, Zero Emission Freight Future, with esteemed panelists Jessie Denver, GO-Biz, David Libatique, Port of LA, Scott Strelecki, SCAG, JT Steenkamp, Prologis, and Matt Schrap, Long Beach Container Terminal. Or for mobility. Thank you, sorry.
Great, thanks everyone. Can you hear me okay? All right. I'm Jessie Denver, and for those of you who don't know what the acronym GO-Biz stands for, it stands for the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And we really appreciate Lacey inviting us to be here for the conversation. So let's get started. All right, so California's made a lot of investments in charging infrastructure, hydrogen infrastructure, and vehicles. And I'd really like to know, beyond charging ports and hydrogen nozzles, what technologies or operational models have the greatest potential to accelerate zero-emission drayage, warehousing, and/or last-mile delivery across the region? And do these technologies need additional incentive or policy support, or is that a gap that we need to really consider filling? JT, I know you have some thoughts on this.
I do. So Prologis owns a lot of real estate for warehouses, 150 million square feet in California alone. By accident of all that roof space, we're North America's largest rooftop solar plant, just as a complete byproduct of that. So about 600 megawatts or so. However, sometimes not a lot of space, but a lot of power. Loads get reconcentrated. The Steenkamp project in Los Angeles that we partnered with the city of Los Angeles for linear generators. So the trucks were coming in 12 months. We didn't have the power, so we worked together to figure out how to build a power plant for that project. California linear generators from Mainspring were used. That, to me, is an exciting technology for our future. It's also e-methanol capable, so you can feed these things everything from natural gas to renewable natural gas to hydrogen to vodka to e-methanol. But in that maritime space, the crossing over of future fuels from the shipping is exciting, as well as DC microgrids that you find on ships, hydrogen drones, or eVTOLs that are focused on cargo is a new sort of exciting space, but that's more on the last mile side.
And CARB's made some recent decisions around linear generators and their access to LCFS credits.
Almost. So we're waiting on a final decision from CARB to grant what's called book and claim access to linear generators to make LCFS credits from renewable sources. It's a little bit tough to do that right now. So for example, this project, even though it's North America's largest truck charging project, it's actually without LCFS credits right now, so it's in spite of access issues. So there's a little bit of policy work left to be done.
Great. Well, Scott, I know that you have been engaged in the ZETI project with our colleagues from CalSTART who are also here. You know, what's needed for future projects beyond the ports and nozzles?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, the Zero Emission Truck Infrastructure Study, on the acronym there, there's definitely been a lot of work, you know, we're talking about on the infrastructure side, but at the same token, there's a huge importance to think about the vehicle side, right? So to the point of last mile delivery, to the point of all this cargo that comes in initially to the ports, there's this inland relationship, and there's also this much fragmented relationship of all the industries, manufacturers, businesses, et cetera, that are all operating with that environment. So to that point, we really see a strong opportunity, a strong need in ensuring that all these vehicles can be suitable for the technology conversion. There's a lot of different business models out there, like I mentioned, from the service standpoint. So you're looking at independent operators, you're looking at major fleets, that contract for hire, you're looking at private fleets. So the technology it's very critical that these vehicles can obviously meet the needs of all those operators. So that lends itself to the potential for new approaches to what is the infrastructure relationship. Maybe there's monitoring systems, platforms, other areas that can be a part of all these needs for these vehicles and technologies as they move forward.
And Matt, who's here, has a very unique perspective on this, having previously been with the Harbor Trucking Association and knowing firsthand what fleets and individual operators, owner-operators might need, and now is with Forum Mobility. So Matt, tell us a little bit about the operating model that really might unlock some of the barriers we've seen.
Well, thank you, Jessie, and thank you to everyone. I'm pinch hitting for my friend Dr. Bonnie Nixon from LBCT today, and she thought it'd be good for me to provide some perspective, especially in the context of how different models work to try to encourage truck operators to get into equipment that they might not otherwise be inclined to do. We all have the underlying feeling of the need to do something about climate change, but at the end of the day, for fleet operators, it's really about economics. And with the peel back of the rules, especially, the economic question of deployment of advanced technologies is first and foremost in front of fleets. And when we think about models and what Forum Mobility does, as well as some of our friends and competitors out there in the marketplace, we offer a soup to nuts type of package where you have a charging as a service, where effectively a fleet operator who's leasing a facility, who might have a landlord who's not necessarily willing to give up a property for up to 10 years to install charging infrastructure, where they are limited by either permitting or other challenges, that they can come to a third-party provider, park their trucks, charge their trucks there, dispatch from the facilities, have their drivers park their personal vehicles there. And so it takes out the challenges of trying to build something, as it's referred to as behind the fence. We couple with that a leasing program. We had a great opportunity through the Climate United Fund that was happening under the last administration. Unfortunately, that got peeled back. We went and sought out private capital to create this lease program because we know that without the truck, the charging is more or less, yard art at some point in time. So the truck at one point was the easier part of the equation. And now we're really seeing the challenges about infrastructure, primarily from the available technology that's out there. We're all really excited about the megawatt charging standard and building sites that are going to be able to charge these trucks much faster, which is going to help with the operational constraints that some fleet operators are under currently, and also with the economics. We've been subsidizing oil and gas for decades. There's no reason why we can't continue to put money into the infrastructure for deployment, whether it's hydrogen or, what's near and dear to my heart, of course, battery electric infrastructure. But that incentive money needs to be coupled with vehicle incentive money on top of it. And the Class 8 drayage space especially is so conducive to that battery electric model that the priority should be there, and we've really seen an uptick in that. But without the rules, again, it all goes back to economics. So we try to create programs that are going to help with cash flow, going to see a positive TCO, leverage the available incentives out there, and provide guaranteed reliable charging for these fleets, because that's what they need to stay in business.
Thanks. So, oh yeah, please, David.
Yeah, so just to add, we, looking beyond nozzles and chargers, the instinct is to throw hardware at the problem, and we certainly, the Port of LA, we do and have received a lot of funding for equipment and infrastructure. We got the $412 million Clean Ports grant from EPA, and we're still drawing down on that. The issue and what we don't want to do is throw hardware at a system that's inefficient. And so where we're beginning to turn, the technology we're really interested in at this moment is digital coordination. So how can we get more turns out of that truck? How can we improve asset utilization? And so we're actually using a $8 million grant we're getting from GO-Biz to introduce a universal truck appointment system at the ports of LA and Long Beach. And it's not about scheduling, it's about actually getting higher utilization out of the trucks. And once you actually put that system in place, then you can get to other things like a virtual green gate for the zero emission trucks, where you're providing you're providing an advantage to those zero-emission trucks to be able to get their appointment and pick up their cargo and get more turns each day. But this is the way that you could use these operational modifications and incentives to really make the hardware investment viable.
Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for bringing up the connection with GO-Biz. It really kind of leads us into the next question, which is around how do we get there?
Sorry, can I also add a little something?
Can
Just
you
very
do it
quickly,
in
I cannot...
Under 60 seconds.
Under 60 seconds, very quickly. MCS, I cannot amplify that stronger. MCS charging. Daimler, where are you? You sponsored this event. Bring your damn MCS truck. Bring it. The water's warm. We're going to build this infrastructure for you, but we need you to show up with your truck. 30% lower emissions with MCS vehicle, higher productivity. It's go time. We're ready for you. Thank you.
Thanks, JT. All right, so that brings us into stakeholder coordination, which is how we get there. We can have grants and incentives, but we really need public-private partnerships to coordinate. So as we accelerate large-scale deployment of zero-emission, medium, heavy-duty infrastructure and vehicles, what coordination among private industry and public sector stakeholders is critical to success and either needs to rapidly scale as we get to 2028 and or is not happening at all today and needs to start happening. So I'd like to start with David, because you have some really unique perspectives here from operating a port and needing to coordinate with international and subnational stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The way we've coordinated with the private sector, so we're a landlord port. We don't actually operate the terminals. We set a lot of policy, we put out incentives, we have tariffs, not Trump tariffs, but we have tariffs that charge fees. And so we really use and leverage the powers we have to try and enact change. And for the past 20 years, we've been using this framework called the Clean Air Action Plan to work with our tenants and stakeholders to accelerate deployment of cleaner technology. The big criticism of that has always been accountability, transparency, and moving from aspirational goals to actually more, harder targets. And we've just turned that page. The ports of LA and Long Beach just entered into a collaborative agreement with the South Coast AQMD, where we're making enforceable commitments to deliver ZE infrastructure plans by date certain. So these are time-bound commitments, but directly to the point of the question, it has structured in stakeholder engagement. So we are also bound by the same agreement to put forward a more robust form of stakeholder engagement with industry, with community groups, to design those plans. And once those plans are in place, then those are going to form then we move straight to the implementation phase. That model is something we want to take and we're beginning to export internationally, which is happening through green shipping corridors. So in the way that LA and Long Beach created a policy framework to accelerate building of the infrastructure and introduction of clean equipment, we're doing that with our partner ports across the Pacific. So we have green shipping corridors with Port of Shanghai, with the Japan-based ports, Yokohama, Tokyo, and Nagoya, with Singapore. And so these are going to be frameworks by which we work with the liner shipping carriers to accelerate introduction of those zero carbon life cycle vessels. So this is especially important as the federal government is really pulling back from global engagement and actually stymieing international regulatory efforts and the net zero framework. These subnational initiatives and collaborations become even more important. So with what happened in October and the adjournment of the IMO's committee dealing with the net zero framework, and without having that policy framework there, I think we're going to push even harder through these green shipping corridors to work on methanol bunkering, get that deployed, and get commitments from the liner carriers to start deploying those ships in the strings of vessels that operate in the Trans-Pacific.
Amazing. And that must be an easy infrastructure add, or is it just a drop in to the infrastructure that exists at your port?
Methanol is going to be a challenge. So it's going to need a collaboration with federal agencies, state agencies, AQMD is going to have to play a critical role. We really need the liner carriers and the fuel providers to really be the tip of the spear, but it's got to be one of their projects, and we want, well, in 2026, we're going to put out an RFP for a methanol bunkering pilot project, and we hope that's going to accelerate the coordination we need to see from various stakeholders.
Great. Matt, you know, as now an infrastructure developer, you are probably looking for sites and trying to acquire sites all the time, coordinating with local government, permitting authority having jurisdictions, the cities and counties. What kind of stakeholder coordination do you really see is critical to deploying the infrastructure that you think is necessary before LA 28 if we really aim to put the goals that we have around zero emission trucking in place by then?
2028 will be a challenge to meet the total demand that the state has forecasted, primarily because you're up against just timelines. And when we go and look at a site, we're typically going to make sure that it's near a freight corridor. The state has done studies on great freight corridors throughout the state and throughout the country, looking at where infrastructure needs to be deployed to support over-the-road trucking, which is the harder nut to crack when it comes to the trucking industry. But we are looking at sites that are already going to have excess capacity on individual circuits, primarily because if you need to go and build a substation, it's going to take 8 to 10 years and cost $10 million. And those timelines and the monetary challenges is why groups like Prologis, ourselves, EV Realty and their partnership with Prologis, Volterra, Watt EV, we're all in this mindset of creating something that's going to be utilizable, if that's even a word, for the fleets to keep their operations rolling. And we think about fellow stakeholders. Obviously, we think about the South Coast. The cooperative partnership, I think, is going to be a game changer, especially if we look at things like David had alluded to with green lanes, virtual appointment systems for battery electric or zero emission vehicles will help drive that operational adoption. I mean, I know that the APMT, AP Moeller terminals in Port of LA at Pier 400, 14% of their moves 1 month was by zero emission trucks. Right now in the ports of LA and Long Beach, you have to remember in context, you have 20,000 trucks that have access to those two facilities. About 14 to 15,000 are what we'd consider regular callers. And on a daily basis, you could have 5,000 to 8,000 trucks, unique vehicles operating down there daily. And so how to drive more utilization of battery electric creates, and hydrogen, creates this opportunity to coordinate with the South Coast, with the ports, to look at a framework to drive that, and with our shipper partners as well. Because there's, varying perspectives on companies' commitments to ESG. For those who are truly looking at reducing their Scope 3 emissions, battery electric is a great assist to that. And when you look at the South Coast AQMD's indirect source rule for warehouses over 100,000 square feet, again, zero emission trucks play a huge role into mitigating whatever type of citation they might receive. And so I'm sure that Prologis knows a lot about that rule, for better or worse. When we think about stakeholders and how to engage with them, it has to be a holistic approach, because again, it's about economics at the end of the day. We're not going to go find a site where we need to spend $10 million with a utility that's going to take 10 years. We're going to work with the utility to find a site, work with stakeholders who are around the area, make sure it's within a freight corridor that's serviceable by the ports, make sure that we have clients, customers, and shippers who are engaged in this process who want to drive the utilization. It's a holistic approach to this, and I think that the more we can have this dialogue about some of the hurdles that are in front of this, which have a lot to do with economics. When we talk about the MCS standard, the current technology out there for heavy-duty trucks, until the Tesla comes into play, until the Windrose vehicle, until Daimler brings their MCS, until Volvo brings it, we're going to be in this world with slower charging times, which have direct economic impact for a fleet, because that's downtime, the truck's not being utilized, it's basically costing money. So how we coordinate with all of those different groups to determine where's the best place where we can put something, it again has to be this holistic approach, and we value our partnerships with all of our stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you. Scott, from from an association of governments perspective and coordinating with all of the AHJs, the counties and the cities, What does that look like from your perspective? What kind of key concerns or issues do local governments have around deploying truck charging hubs? And how do you work with them on that, if at all?
Yeah, so I already mentioned our zero emission truck infrastructure study. We also have, so right off the bat, that's a partnership obviously with the CEC. We have our last mile freight program. That's a partnership with Air Quality Management District. We obviously work closely with the ports, the trucking associations, the 6 counties like you mentioned, and then they have all their local jurisdictions. So through our planning, research, and analysis work that we do, we've kind of tried to initially bridge like how you look at transportation demand on the trucking side versus energy demand, right? But we're taking this from a planning perspective. And through that process, what we've learned is obviously there's a key connection with the utilities as a part of the infrastructure needs, and at the same time, the local jurisdictions. You know, there's a lot of different variation in cities. Some cities are a lot bigger, they have a lot more resources, and they can kind of bring their own technical expertise, their own partnerships and relationships to the table. Other cities can't, and they're looking for leveraging more. So at our agency, we really try to provide that research side, analysis side, to help bring some of those planning and technical tools to the table to help them in their needs. And then at the same time, being a part of some of the administering some of the implementation on the vehicle side. We're able to have some partnerships with some of the different companies that are actually operating the new technologies, whether it's a major food service provider, whether it's independent owner operator, or all those different entities. So we're also able to bring in some of that industry perspective and understanding of where are the pain points, what are the challenges, what are the needs, and also help try to bridge that with some of our member agencies and our other partners. But I think overall, like, I agree 100% with everything that's being set up here. You know, the partnerships are key, the collaboration is key, and you know, it's complicated. There's just a lot of variables out there. There's a lot of priorities, and I think that from our agency's standpoint, we try to fit in that collaborator role as best as we can to support all these different stakeholders.
Thanks. Well, you know, kind of moving into policy and regulation, how are federal regulatory changes shaping your investment, technology, and operational planning decisions? You know, the Olympics really is kind of a catalytic opportunity to maybe redefine some of the narrative here that we see on a national stage, because the whole world will be here. So from each of your perspectives, you know, David, maybe you first, how are the federal regulatory changes kind of shaping your investment decisions? You know, you have clean ports, you mentioned that from EPA.
Yeah, so the first thing, beginning January this year, is we wanted to make sure we're locked in on the $412 million grant we got from EPA. And we've got a terrific relationship with Region 9. We've been drawing down on that funding. Our terminal partners, there are 4 active terminals that are working on implementing projects under that EPA Clean Ports Award. So $412 million, 400 plus electric pieces of electric cargo handling equipment will be deployed as a result of this grant, including solar arrays, some battery storage systems, 300 EV charging stations. So it is a massive grant. It's going to convert approximately 20% of the cargo handling equipment that operate at our 6 major container terminals. So it's a key part of our zero emission transition. All of that is still moving along and is still underway in spite of policy changes occurring out of DC. Where we've run into most of the headwinds has really been in that international collaboration. And so we were expecting a good deal of certainty to be injected into ship decarbonization with IMO action in October. That did not happen. So what we're trying to do now is work within the green shipping corridors we have that are super active. So Shanghai, super active. Singapore, very active. And we're trying to collaborate with the other corridors to provide greater certainty to industry to actually deploy those cleaner vessels, get those ship orders in. The headwinds we're encountering right now come in the form of China-based ship tariffs. leading to economic, perverse economic incentives. So to avoid that cost, what we were actually going to look at was dirtier ships being routed to California to be able to avoid paying that fee, because a lot of the newer Chinese-built vessels were the cleaner ones, but they would be exposed to exorbitant fees under the USTR Section 301 tariffs. So the fact that we got a year-long hiatus on that is actually good. Hopefully that is more prolonged, but that did inject a good deal of uncertainty into what we're trying to do with ship decarb. But in response to those policy changes and what is going to be really no long-term settling down of international relations we're not anticipating settling down of that, the political rivalry across the Pacific. We're going to have to try and hold things together as best we can on a corridor-by-corridor basis, merge and coordinate action with those other corridors. There are a lot of active corridors going from Europe to Asia as well. Seattle has a cruise corridor going, operating as well, and they have a corridor with South Korea. So we want to combine efforts with those other green shipping corridors to try and make up for and fill that void left by the political changes we've encountered.
Thank you. JT, I know you've talked a little bit about linear generators and the investment decisions around that. Prologis is also interested in hydrogen drones for delivery. Talk a little bit about kind of what policy, regulatory steps are necessary to put even a pilot project in action, but really what is driving your investment decisions into that kind of a technology?
Yeah. Interestingly, we haven't really blinked when it comes to zero-emission vehicle infrastructure investment, despite the noise, perhaps at a high level. In fact, the policy conditions in California are beautiful right now for infrastructure investment of zero-emission vehicles. The new LCFS system was ratified in July. It creates tremendous opportunity to electrify, and not just trucks or things that have had a sort of TCO, total cost of ownership parity for a long time or longer time, like light duty and medium duty as well. But it also, it allows us also the last couple of months. In fact, I've never thought so creatively in my life with the pressures from the federal level to think of the relationship to our vacancies. We are I mentioned the largest rooftop solar plant. We've only covered 8% of our roofs with solar. So what else? Well, guess what? Guess what the administration did? Is they protected the green hydrogen production tax credit. So is there maybe a rethinking of the stranded vacancy that the net metering policies can't support anymore, to lean into that domain? And when you actually look at it and you work with these drone companies, you're like, oh, actually, did you know you don't have to have a diesel hybrid eVTOL? It's actually lower cost to use this farm-to-table green hydrogen. We just harvested gluten-free, yesterday. So to me, I cannot be more giddy about these futures. And if GO-Biz can help, paint some targets on some pilots, would love to accommodate more breakthrough ideas, like that.
Thanks. I'll do my best. Scott, you also had the last mile freight program, and part of its partnership with South Coast Air Quality Management District. And that regional funding must have been extremely important in the absence of, what we're not seeing from the federal government. How important is it at this moment in time, regionally, as we move into LA 28, for entities like South Coast AQMD to really support all of you here?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very important, that money. I mean, we're responsible for administrating $50 million of a $500 million award. And that award is from the EPA, and it is, as far as I understand, we are at the forefront. You know, our region is leading the nation, essentially, in where we're at with pushing out all this funding resource capacity. So for us, it's very important for the Last Mile Freight Program to just continue to progress. We're focused on Class 4 or 5 vehicles. Other components of that Invest Clean program more broadly are focused on Class 7, 8. There's a lot of other programs out there, Class 6. So you're basically covering all of, you know, the commercial vehicle areas. And for us, we see it as a tremendous opportunity because we're also involved in the LA28 Games Mobility Executive partners. We are leading the Transportation Demand Management work stream. So on the goods movement side, we convene quarterly freight industry forums, and these have been going on for a year. So pretty much everyone up here is a part of that. As you can imagine, all the freight stakeholders that need to be a part of that. And we see the kind of synergy there is to start thinking about how this zero emission program can potentially start leading up to opportunities as you build towards the Olympics and thinking about even beyond the legacy. So what are the operational needs? We know there's a lot of capital, there's a lot of funding requirements to grow and scale, but also we think there's a big opportunity to think operationally, what does that mean? We have FIFA coming. I think there's maybe going to be an NBA All-Star game, there's going to be the Super Bowl, there's the Olympics. I mean, this region just has a ton of building opportunities to be thinking about, you know, how do we start strategizing? So we are going to look to leverage the Last Mile Freight Program and the zero emission work that we're doing towards all of these opportunities and work with some of these freight stakeholders to see if they can showcase.
Great. And that kind of leads us into the future. And to your point, you know, we have the World Cup coming, great opportunity maybe to pilot some of these interesting projects like delivery drones, for example, so that we can get some lessons learned as we move into LA28 and maybe scale those technologies even more. So looking at the 2028 games as a catalytic opportunity, what should we prioritize in the next 18 months to ensure zero-emission freight solutions are fully integrated, not just into daily operations, but beyond the games? JT, I know you have some thoughts around this, specifically for designing purpose-built infrastructure for multiple sector use cases.
Right. It links a little bit to something that Matt mentioned, which was this timescale of 2028 and the tremendous amount of capacity we need to bring to the fore. I would argue that we demonstrated the future 2 years ago with that Denker project and linear generators. If anyone tells you you can only do big power fast in Texas, tell them to go talk to another South African who would disagree with them and show them the Denker project. We built that project in 12 months collaboratively with the city of Los Angeles. LADWP specifically couldn't have done it without them. That was 12 months end to end, 5 months construction. We in LA have demonstrated you can do big power fast, but it needs a little bit of future fitness and thinking. Things like linear generators, these omnivorous mechanical fuel cells, essentially what they are. Bring them to the fore, make it easier, not harder, to collaborate on public-private partnership fronts with DER. That is one thing. Once you've built them, you'll notice something really interesting, and that's that these freight corridors and these communities where these freight charging projects where the habitats are, happens to overlay sometimes the needs of a community in transit. And so, do you guys remember the Athens Olympics and the Olympic swimming pools with the weeds 2 weeks after? Or the World Cup in Brazil with the stadium in Manaus, in the northern state of Brazil, overtaken by the jungle. I have these fever dreams about our infrastructure and those narratives, and I think we can arrest them if we do that right. If we build infrastructure that's for the Olympics and beyond, and you can do that if you take both public and freight into account, because guess what? Buses and these trucks will be using MCS chargers in the near future.
Matt, is that something from your perspective as also a developer that you would be interested in building a third-party site that has an area for transit buses to charge and for Class 7, 8 trucks to charge?
We would take any opportunity to increase utilization. You know, we talk about the white elephants that are left over from major international sporting events. There's some white elephant charging infrastructure happening right now, today. And you have overcapacity where we went from the infrastructure being the problem to the truck being the easiest part to now the truck's easier, but the infrastructure is there for the most part. We need to upgrade to this MCS standard in order to get those charging time faster. But utilization is the key. Going back to the federal policy question, and this has to do with the future for obvious reasons, I think that can go unsaid here, but when we think about utilization and what the mentality of many stakeholders in the trucking industry is that we're seeing a major rollback of environmental standards for heavy-duty engines that has never happened before. Never has a heavy-duty waiver been denied, yet alone pulled back under CRA. And you throw in the Climate United issue, which directly impacted our organization, the gold bricks off the end of the Titanic, sent this message out there to the community that it's like, oh, well, we don't need to do this anymore, right? Trump says we don't have to do this. And we're up against this mentality that is out there. Now, while not all trucking fleets are created equal, of course, it's about having them understand that California has its own money. California has its own regulatory authority that in many instances they could write a rule that doesn't require any type of federal waiver. And what those lessons learned from the past and moving forward and trying to change the mentality to increase utilization, I think will be critical and goes back to the stakeholder conversation. Because we don't want to build infrastructure that's not going to be utilized or build for a flash in the pan. A lot of events coming up, but after that, the future proofing really boils down to utilization. And then that goes full circle back to economics. If the economics work for any stakeholder within goods movement, be it from last mile to up through drayage, over the road, LTL, whichever individual lane, as we call them, we want to talk about, it has to be about economics. And so continual support from the state, I think, will help offset some of those concerns that have been put forth about, excuse me, the federal government's commitment to zero emissions. For some reason, they do not like electric vehicles. You can get a hybrid with some of this grant money out there, but you can't go electric. And this myopic perspective, I think, can't last. But in California, we are full speed ahead. But we need the utilization and we need the stakeholders to understand and appreciate that while this transition is inevitable, it has to make economic sense to be sustainable. And where we cross those two lines has been the challenge, and I think will remain the challenge until we see truck costs come down precipitously. Charging time goes up along with battery chemistry that gives you more range. If you're saving money, you don't need a regulation to get people to use the equipment.
So it sounds like the state we might consider making some targeted geographic investments into this region to really help move things along in the next 18 months. That's something we should think about. All right, last question. We have 1 minute and 20 seconds to go. David, what's your vision for 2028 and what are you committing to do to get there?
So thanks to the collaborative agreement we have with AQMD, the next 5 years of my life have already been mapped out. So I think about where the Olympics rest. By end of 2027, we will have a plan for zero-emission infrastructure for all the container terminals, as well as port investment in drayage truck infrastructure. So we'll be months into implementation of that by the time the Olympics rolls around. weeks before the Olympics start, we will deliver a draft plan for the remaining balance of our terminals, for Harborcraft and for Locomotive.
Amazing.
And what I'm really hoping, and with the backdrop of the Olympics, the world's premier international sporting event, is that we can actually use that as a backdrop to have international conversations about ships. Because a plan for ships and ship infrastructure needs to be delivered by the end of the following year. And so I can't think of a better backdrop to start hosting some of those conversations than when the world comes to LA.
Scott, in a few words, what are you committing to?
Yeah, I think for us, we're focused on our planning for the 2028 games, and we are going to be looking at piloting opportunities, so that's going to be very critical next year for FIFA and for the other events. And I think the key thing is to have some deployment strategies, some new technologies, and some things going on during the games, and trying to carry that forward after. Yeah.
Great. Just a few words. What are you committing to, JT?
We have 1,000 warehouses in California. Predominance of them orbit the games. We will make sure that our customers in those warehouses, those that lease them and operate out of there, are ready. They are going to need it. In addition to that, every spare bit of capacity of our energy network, our energy assets, whether mobility or power generation, will bring that to bear.
Matt?
We will commit to continually drive utilization for battery electric heavy duty vehicles in the state. I think it'd be fantastic to see the port population of the 600 some odd zero emission trucks be tripled by then, and to demonstrate to the world that outside of China, where there's a tremendous amount of zero emission battery electric deployment going down, that we too here in California are focused on the future and realize the importance of this transition, while also being mindful of that economic thing that I keep talking about.
Thank you. Well, please join me in thanking the panel.